Hello, my dear students, and welcome to Sri Jendra Rank Zone classes. I am Amit Ajmani, and in today's class, I will discuss with you a new chapter that is atomic structure, atoms and its structure. We already have studied, we already know what an atom is, what is an atomic structure, how exactly the arrangement of various particles in an atom exists. But let us brush up all the basic concepts related to atomic structure. We know today that an atom is just like this. It contains a nucleus and it has various shells or energy levels or orbits around it. In the nucleus, we have got subatomic particles called protons and neutrons, which together are called nucleons. And in these orbits or the energy levels, we know that there are electrons. But initially, when we never knew about electrons, protons, and neutrons, then without the technology, there were many efforts which were made in order to make sure that we know and we study the structure of atom as we know in the present times. So let us start up with the brief history of the structure of atom. Firstly, an Indian philosopher, Maharshi Kannad, you must have heard the name probably in science only. He was one of the first persons to propose that matter, which basically we call as Padarth in our Hindi language. The matter is made up of very small particles called Anu and Parmanu. So he was the first person to relate that all matter is made up of very small particles, and he called them Anu and Parmanu. John Dalton called these particles by the name of atom, and the word atom means indivisible, something which cannot be divided further. John Dalton gave his Dalton's atomic theory, in which he gave various postulates. The major ones, he said that all the matter is made up of small particles called atoms. Next postulate was these atoms are indivisible. They cannot be further divided. He also said that the atoms of any particular element are always same in all respects, and different elements have different kind of atoms, and these atoms of various elements, they combine together in fixed ratio. So all those were postulates of Dalton's atomic theory, but there were certain drawbacks, and one of the most important drawback was he assumed that atom is indivisible, it cannot be further divided. But today we know that atoms are further divided into three subatomic particles: electrons, protons, and neutrons. We know the details about these three subatomic particles. Electrons, we know they have negative charge. Protons are positively charged, whereas neutrons have no charge, they are neutral. We also know today that the arrangement of atom is such that protons and neutrons are present in a very small nucleus located at the center of the atom, and being neutral, neutrons do not provide any charge, but because protons are positively charged, therefore due to the presence of these positively charged protons, the nucleus also has a positive charge. Electrons are not present in the nucleus, they are outside the nucleus, and they revolve rapidly around the nucleus in fixed circular paths which are known as energy levels or shells, or we also call them orbits. Fine. Now, very importantly, even though an atom has electrons which are negatively charged, it has protons which are positively charged, but still, on the whole, an atom is electrically neutral. That means there is no overall positive or negative charge whatsoever. Why? Because we know that the number of electrons outside the nucleus is equal to the number of protons inside the nucleus. Electrons are negatively charged, protons are positively charged, and because they are equal and opposite charges, so they cancel out each other, making an atom electrically neutral as a whole. Now, one more thing you need to remember is hydrogen atom is made up of only one electron and one proton. It does not contain any neutron. So hydrogen, the lightest atom, contains only one electron and one proton. It is the only element which lacks neutrons. You need to remember. Okay. Now, we have studied a bit about electrons, protons, neutrons, etc. Let us try to relate where exactly they came from. So just going back into the history and trying to relate how these were discovered, and we'll be discussing about a few characteristics of electrons, protons and neutrons. You have already done all these things, I know that, but the important thing is, number one, we need to brush up, we need to revise, we need to go through all these concepts to make sure that they are embedded in our minds. Second important thing is, I think I know that you also will agree that even though we have studied all these things, but we still need revision because we tend to forget things. So just a fast recap of all the things. Let us talk about discovery of electrons first. These subatomic fundamental particles, electrons, they exist in an atom. This was shown by J.J. Thomson is in 1897. So J.J. Thomson was the first person in 1897. Just imagine how long back story it is. At that particular point when the technology was so crude, the instruments, the apparatus, the concepts, nothing, no facilities of any kind were available to them, but still, just because they were genius, they were able to discover so many things at that time. Now, how he did it? Just a simple experiment brief, that Thomson passed electricity at high voltage through a gas at a very low pressure taken in a discharge tube. He observed that streams of minute particles were given out by the cathode, that is the negative electrode. And since they were given from the cathode, he called them cathode rays. And these cathode rays, they consisted of small negatively charged particles. And as far as this name electrons for these negatively charged particles is concerned, that was given by Stoney. So electron was named by Stoney, right? This is how electrons were discovered. On repeated experimentation, there were few characteristics they were found related to electrons. Number one, mass of an electron. Now the mass of an electron is about 1 by 1840 times of the mass of hydrogen atom. Now the mass of hydrogen atom, it has the lowest mass. I just told you that it is the lightest element. So it has the lowest mass, and therefore the mass of a hydrogen atom is considered to be 1 unit. So we can say that the relative mass of electron, what is relative mass in relation to hydrogen? The relative mass is 1 by 1840 units, which is equivalent to 9.11 into 10 to the power minus 28 grams. This is almost negligible, right? Now talking about the charge on an electron. The absolute charge on an electron is 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulomb of negative charge. Now this is considered to be the smallest negative charge which is carried by any particle. So this is considered as the unit of negative charge. So we can say that the relative charge of an electron is minus 1. So these are two things that we need to relate and remember as far as electrons are concerned. Now after that, protons were discovered, and it was E. Goldstein who showed the existence of protons in the atoms. How? When he passed electricity at high voltage through a gas at very low pressure taken in a discharge tube, he saw that streams of heavy particles were given out by the anode. And since they were given out from the anode, that is the positive electrode, number one, these rays were called anode rays. And because they were from the anode positive electrode, so they assumed that these anode rays consist of positively charged particles, and they were called protons, right? We have already discussed that hydrogen gas is the lightest gas and hydrogen atom is the lightest atom, containing only one proton and one neutron. Okay, now talking about the characteristics of protons, let us try to relate once again both the things. First will be the mass of the proton, second will be the charge on a proton. What is the mass? The relative mass of a proton is 1 unit. And if we compare the mass of proton with that of an electron, then we say that the mass of the proton is 1840 times that of an electron, which is equivalent to 1.66 into 10 to the power minus 24 grams. Talking about the charge of a proton, the absolute charge of a proton is 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulomb of positive charge. And since this is the charge as we have studied in case of electrons, that it is the charge which is the smallest positive charge carried by any particle, that is why it is taken to be a unit of positive charge, and we can say that the relative charge of a proton is plus 1. Correct? Now here I would like to add one more thing. At times students I've seen normally that they get confused. How? If we are talking about charge on an electron, it is 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulomb of negative charge. And when we talk about charge on an proton, it is also 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulomb of positive charge. So we need to remember that when we are talking about 10 to the power minus 19, it is in both cases 10 to the power minus 19 only. The electron having negative and proton having negative positive charge, that is here, not here. At times the children get confused that sir, because electron have negative charge, it should be 10 to the power minus 19, and since proton have positive charge, it should be 10 to the power plus 19. No, in both the cases with 19 we have got minus only. The minus and plus as per electron and proton, that is in front. So 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulomb of positive charge, and same 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulomb of negative charge. This is how we represent charges on protons and electrons, right? Now, after the discovery of protons, it was normally for quite some time thought that an atom consists of only electrons and protons. But it was noticed that all the mass of an atom could not be accounted for on the basis of only protons and electrons. For example, if we talk about carbon, now carbon has 6 protons and it has got 6 electrons, right? Now the mass of electron is negligible, it is not even considered. So carbon should have the actual mass which is due to the 6 protons which are present, but the carbon mass is 12 units. Why is it so? So it was deeply considered and it was concluded that apart from electron and protons, there must be some other particles. And this problem was solved by James Chadwick in 1932 when he discovered another subatomic particle which was called neutron. Now the neutron initially it could not be found out. Reason is because it is a neutral particle which is present in the nucleus of an atom and its mass is equal to that of the mass of a proton. Now it was easily concluded why the mass of carbon is 12, because of 6 protons and because of 6 neutrons which added up. Talking about the characteristic of a neutron, the mass of a neutron is just equal to the mass of a proton. That is relative mass considered to be 1 unit, which is equal to 1.66 into 10 to the power minus 24 gram, just like a proton. We can also say that it is also equal to 1840 times the mass of electrons. And as far as the charge of a neutron is concerned, we know that there is no charge. Neutrons are electrically neutral, right? So now after going through electron, protons and neutrons, let us try to compare them as far as their mass and charge and location is concerned. So we will be comparing between protons, neutrons and electrons. These are the subatomic particles, protons, neutrons and electrons. We'll try to relate their relative mass, their relative charge and location in the atom. The relative mass of proton is 1 unit, of that of neutron is also 1 unit. They have got equal relative mass. And the electron, the relative mass is 1840 times less than the mass of proton or neutron. Talking about the relative charge, proton has a relative charge of +1, electrons have a relative charge of -1 and neutrons are neutral, zero charge. Protons are present and located in the nucleus along with the neutrons which are also in the nucleus, and electrons are outside the nucleus in energy shells, orbits, right, or energy levels. Protons and neutrons which are present in the nucleus of an atom, they together are also called nucleons. They are also termed as nucleons. So what are nucleons? These are the particles present in the nucleus, that is protons and neutrons. Now electrons, protons and neutrons were discovered. Neutrons were discovered later in 1932, as we have just said. After the discovery of electrons and protons, many scientists tried to give their models of an atom as to how these electrons or protons are actually present. What is the arrangement? And such efforts, not many people did. Out of those, The first commendable was that of Thomson. Thomson gave his own model of an atom. He proposed his model in 1903, and we know that by this time no neutrons were discovered. So Thomson's model was based on only electrons and protons, right? And according to his model, what did he say? He said that an atom consists of a sphere or a ball of positive charge with negative charges, electrons in the form of negatively charges, they are embedded on it, right? So we can say that his model of the atom was quite similar to that of a Christmas pudding. The electrons which he said are embedded in that sphere of positive charge, they were just like the currants or the dry fruits in spherical Christmas pudding. He also said that the positive and negative charges in an atom are equal in magnitude, and of course opposite charges, due to which an atom is electrically neutral. It has no overall positive or negative charge. So this was the Thomson's model of an atom. According to him, he was perfectly fine as per giving his model, but one problem, he never mentioned neutrons because he never knew about the existence of neutrons. So when neutrons were discovered in 1932, obviously there would have been and should have been a different model being proposed. And that new model was proposed by Rutherford. Rutherford, through his experiment, he discovered nucleus for the very first time, and this experiment is also known as the gold foil experiment or gold leaf experiment, because in his experiment he used a thin gold foil. Now what exactly he did, try to relate his experiment a bit. He allowed the fast moving alpha particles. We should know that alpha particles are positively charged particles, helium particles. When they were allowed to strike a very thin gold foil in vacuum, he observed a few things. This is what exactly happened. He observed a few things. From here, he just allowed these alpha particles to go through, right? These are the gold foil atoms. These are the atoms of the gold foil. Now, what exactly his observations were, please try to relate very, very seriously. His observations were that most of the alpha particles just went straight, no change whatsoever in their direction. So, most of the alpha particles, they went straight, right? Second observation he made was a few alpha particles, they actually got deflected, but by small angles. A few alpha particles, again they got deflected, but this time with large angle. And a very few alpha particles just bounced back. So these were his observations. What are these? Most of the alpha particles pass straight through the gold foil without any change or deflection from the original path. A few alpha particles were deflected through small angles, and a few were deflected through large angles, and a few alpha particles completely rebound on hitting the gold foil and turn back on their path. These were his observations. Now, very, very importantly, what conclusion did he draw? He observed these things, and the conclusion he drew was based on his observations. The first observation was that most of the alpha particles went straight. So he said, or he concluded, that in an atom there is a lot of empty space, because of which most of the alpha particles are going straight. Now, the cause of deflection of these alpha particles, he said that in the middle, in the center of these atoms, there is something which is positively charged, and he called it nucleus, because the alpha particles are also positively charged and the nucleus present in the atom is also positively charged. That is why it actually repels the alpha particles, due to which there was a deflection. And quite importantly, because one or two alpha particles bounced back, so he concluded, number one, that the nucleus is very, very small. Number two, this nucleus is very, very dense, because when these alpha particles they rebounded, it was just as a ball rebounds on hitting a hard wall. So that was very dense, very hard. And based on his observations and conclusions, right, he showed the presence of a nucleus and stated that nucleus of an atom is positively charged, nucleus of an atom is very dense and hard, and nucleus of an atom is very small as compared to the size of the atom as a whole. Now, after discovering nucleus, he gave his own model. Now, what is Rutherford's model of an atom? Let us try to relate. According to Rutherford, he said that an atom consists of a positively charged, dense, and very small nucleus containing all the protons and neutrons, and almost the entire mass of an atom is concentrated in the nucleus itself only. This nucleus is surrounded by negatively charged electrons, and these electrons are revolving around the nucleus in circular paths at very high speeds. These circular paths of the electrons are called orbits. Furthermore, he said that the electrostatic attraction between the positively charged nucleus and the negatively charged electrons is the actual force which holds the atom together. He added that an atom is electrically neutral because the number of protons and electrons in an atom is equal, due to which these equal and opposite charges cancel out each other. And he said that most of the atom is a empty space. So this was the Rutherford's model of an atom. Now it was based on great logics, everything was perfectly fine, but still it suffered from a serious drawback. Now what was the drawback of Rutherford's model of an atom? His drawback was he could not explain the stability of an atom. Let us try to explain it a bit. Now, there is an electromagnetic theory of physics which says that if a charged particle undergoes accelerated motion, that is a circular motion, then it must radiate energy or lose energy continuously. Now, according to Rutherford, he said that electrons are rapidly just orbiting the nucleus in a circular orbit. So, according to the electromagnetic theory of physics, this negatively charged electron should either radiate or lose energy, because of which, as and when it loses energy, it will be attracted more and more towards the positively charged nucleus at the center, and because of that, it should finally and ultimately collapse with the nucleus. It should not remain stable. But this does not happen. The atom remains stable. Why this electron does not collide with the nucleus? Why it does not radiate energy? This was not explained by Rutherford, and that was the main drawback of Rutherford's model of an atom. Now, this drawback was overcome by yet another genius called Niels Bohr. He explained the stability of an atom, right? The objection which was against Rutherford's model of an atom, it was him who explained in detail, and he gave a new arrangement of electrons in the atoms in 1913 according to Rutherford. The major thing, the major problem was he could not explain the stability, right? But Niels Bohr said that the electrons could revolve around the nucleus in only certain orbits or certain energy levels, and each orbit has a different radius. Now, very importantly, the electrons in each orbit have a characteristic amount of energy. The electrons which are in orbits closer to the nucleus have low energy, while in orbits farther from the nucleus, these electrons will have high energy. Second very important point that he gave was that when an electron is revolving in a particular orbit or a particular energy level around the nucleus, the electron does not radiate energy. It does not lose energy even though it has accelerated motion around the nucleus. And it is because of this reason that electrons do not lose energy while revolving in these orbits. That is why they do not fall into nucleus. That is why the atom does not collapse. That is why the atoms remain stable. And based on this, Niels Bohr gave his own model of the atom, and this is the model of the atom which we follow even at the present times. So, the atomic structure that we follow today is given by Niels Bohr. Let us see what he has to say about it. He said that an atom is made up of three particles. We know these are electrons, protons, and neutrons. Electrons have negative charge, protons have positive charge, neutrons have no charge. And due to the presence of equal number of negative charge electrons and positively charged protons cancelling out each other's effect, the atom on the whole is electrically neutral. Second point he gave was the protons and neutrons are located in a small nucleus at the center of the atom, and due to the protons, nucleus is positively charged because neutrons, they don't have any charge on them. Now the electrons, they revolve rapidly around the nucleus in fixed circular paths called orbits or energy levels or shells. And these energy levels or shells, they can be represented in two ways. Either we can number them first, second, third, fourth and fifth shell and sixth shell, or by the letters K, L, M, N, O and P. And these energy levels are counted from the center outwards. That means the nucleus. If this is the nucleus, then this energy level will be the first or the K shell. Second one will be the L shell and so on. Very importantly, he said that there is a limit to the number of electrons which each energy level can hold. He said that the first energy level or the K shell can hold a maximum of 2 electrons. The second energy level or L shell, it can hold a maximum of 8 electrons. Third energy level or the M shell can hold a maximum of 18 electrons. Fourth energy level or N shell can hold a maximum of 32 electrons, and this is what he told earlier, that the shell which is closer to the nucleus has lesser energy, and because of that lesser amount of energy, the cell closer to nucleus will hold less amount of electrons. As we go away from the nucleus, the energy of each and every shell increases, due to which it can bind more electrons, it can hold more electrons because of that extra energy, right? Now, quite important observation here. This is what made him different from Rutherford. He said that each energy level or shell is associated with a fixed amount of energy. As we have said, that the shell nearest to the nucleus has minimum energy, and the shell farthest from the nucleus has the maximum energy, because of which it can hold more electrons. Very important point. There is no change in the energy of electrons as long as they keep revolving in the same energy level and the atoms remain stable. What exactly he meant by saying it, please try to relate that as long as the electrons are revolving in the same energy level, there will be no change in the energy of electrons. It will not radiate energy, it will not lose energy, and hence it remains in that shell, and hence it does not collapse with the nucleus, and hence it does not get attracted towards the centrally positive charge, and therefore the atom remains stable. Clear? So this was the main point which actually explained the stability of an atom. Now the change in the energy of an electron takes place only when it jumps from a lower energy level to a higher energy level, or when it comes down from a higher energy level to a lower energy level. Now whenever an electron gains energy, because it has got more energy now, so it will move, it will jump from a lower energy level to a higher energy level. And when an electron comes down from a higher energy level to a lower energy level, it loses energy. Or the other way of saying it is, if it loses energy, then it will come from higher energy level or the shell to a lower energy level or the shell. So these were the various postulates of Niels Bohr's atomic model or model of an atom. Very important things. Thomson's model, Rutherford gold leaf experiment, very important. Alpha particles he took. What were the conclusions he drew? What were the conclusions, and what was his model based on his conclusions, which were based on his observations when he did the gold leaf experiment? One major drawback, he could not explain the stability of an atom, because of which his model was not actually accepted. And the stability was explained by Niels Bohr. The main thing which distinguished him was his conclusion and his statement that all the electrons which are revolving around the nucleus, they are in fixed energy levels, and as long as they remain in those fixed energy levels, there will be no change in their energy whatsoever, due to which they will neither lose energy nor gain energy, and therefore they will remain in that energy shell, and the atom remains stable. Got it? So this is a bit about the Niels Bohr model, and this is a bit about all the experimentation and all the efforts made by different people in order to explain the structure of an atom. Correct? We are ending this particular lecture here only, because I think that you need some time to go through all these, try to relate, try to understand, try to learn all these models, all these postulates, the model given by Thomson, the model of an atom given by Rutherford, and the Thomson and the model given by Niels Bohr. Fine. So till here, please go through it all. Learn these things side by side. Definitely you'll be benefited if you are learning these side by side. And next topic will be taking up in the next class. Till then, keep studying, keep enjoying, have a great time, and thank you so much for being with me.